Hey everybody, this is Darren Dewitt Henson,
And I'm Tari Henson.
and you are watching and listening to the In the Groove podcast. Now, today is an incredibly special day. We have a legend in the building for the In the Groove podcast. This man actually needs no introduction at all. I mean, his credits are too long to mention, but what I will say is he has been over 6 decades a philanthropist, an actor, a producer, an activist, a speaker. We're going to show you, talk to you, and reintroduce you to the legend himself. Mr. Danny Glover is in the studio with us today.
Welcome, Mr. Glover.
How are you, Mr. Glover? How you doing
Are
today?
you talking about me?
Yes, sir. You know, it's so beautiful to have you in here. You know, clearly the first time I met you, I was doing heavily involved in the Pan-African Film Festival in LA, which you show up for every year, year after year after year. And it's so amazing the work that you do off screen. And I wanted to highlight some of that work because clearly people know you and people feel like you're their father and their grandfather because they know you from the movie. So every time someone sees you, they want to take a picture with you. They wrap their arms around you and they just distribute so much love to you. But we wanted to talk about things that you have done for years and years and why you have done them. I know personally that you have been giving to the Black diaspora from your heart for so many years. The culture through the artistic medium of acting. We want to talk about some of that today. I know Tari is excited about asking you certain questions from your beginning that most people don't know about. And I think that's one of the things we want to start off with today. Tari?
So, Mr. Glover, I heard you in an interview speak on Anthol Fugar, his play, Master Harold and the Boys. And you said that it was special because it really was about the anti-apartheid movement. But before that, you weren't acting. What about Fugar's words inspired you to become an actor in this play beginning?
One of the most memorable moments of my young life, and I could credit for all this my mother and father, was watching the Montgomery bus boycott. And in 1955, I was 9 years old. And my parents, I just felt I had the best parents, And I had my dad was the shortest one in the family, but he was the most beautiful man I've ever known in my life. I remember when I was 5 years old, he had gone to bury his father in Kansas City. And I got hit by a car. We were living in the federal housing complex. I got hit by a car. Not serious, but I broke my right femur.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being in the hospital. My dad was gone, as I said, to bury his own father. I remember being in the hospital and him coming to see me, and my dad was so nurturing. In the Black community, you don't have the tradition
Of the nurturing.
Yeah.
The tradition
father.
of nurturing.
Yeah.
But not, I come from a very, very, very strong matriarchal line.
Right, that's right.
My grandmother was a giant. My mother was a giant. We and my mother were just Sometimes we argue like girlfriend and boyfriend. I was crazy about her. You know, that's the first thing. I was really in love with my mom.
You can see that your face
really
lights
in love
up.
with my dad, man. It didn't have to be, you know, that moment when we lost my mom in an automobile accident before her time, you know. Suddenly, it was like I had the chance to be around the next 18 years with this amazing man who I knew what it was. We only referred to each other as partner, buddy, baby. So,
Wow.
you know,
Wow.
it was like I said, "What's going on, partner?" He called me, "What we gonna do,
Yeah,
partner?"
oh.
Like, that's all right, baby. You know, whatever you want to do. And I think that then I had the most incredible, wonderful. I have siblings as well.
Wow.
I said that all my brother, my one sister. Please God, I wish you would have given my mother another girl.
Wow.
Because of 4 knuckleheads, including yours truly, and everything. So I had those things, you know, in some sense, in some ways, you know, and they remain an aspect of who I was, such a deep aspect, a deep reference to who I am.
I think that still exists because you have so much love that you distribute to people. And I hear you say baby all the time.
You know, but it's the thing. I think if I was to say something about that, and then the time that I said my memory begins as doing the Montgomery Boys Sport.
Yes.
And I saw the way they saw it. I watched them to try to interpret how important that moment was. And for, you know, a child 9 years old at the time when that was going on, I became so attached to that because they became attached to it. My mother, as I said, born in the Deep South, Louisville, Georgia. Family started out, my grandmother, her mother and father started out as sharecroppers. You know, and all of that. But I remember, my mother would get on her phone with her mother and father. "Hello, Daddy, how are you? Mama, how are you, Mama? How are you doing that?" It was so gentle.
Everybody checked in on their people.
It was that there was not. She made us know, let us know that you see these 2 people here.
Right. You love and
right
respect
here,
them.
right here. I am who I am because of them.
Yes.
I mean, who I am because Mama, Daddy. It was that, you know. Of course, we got in trouble. You know, I remember when my mama passed. My dad said to my brothers, "Hey man, y'all go to jail. You gotta wait. You gotta wait your trial day
Because we ain't getting you out."
we ain't bailing you out." That's what my mama said.
You know, when you talk about those things, I remember when I walked across the Pettus Bridge at one of the anniversaries. I remember how that felt and thinking about all the people that came before me who fought for freedom and who fought for equality. So while I was on that bridge, I remember praying. I remember saying, thank you for that day. But you being in the middle of it and having a family, your mom, your dad, who you love, that I think made a difference, right? To allow you to become who you are today.
Well, I for a long time, I thought, because my parents came to the post office, United States Post Office in the late 1940s. 1948, they both came to the post office. So I thought what I saw in the newspapers, and to some degree, to a large degree, that was the case, that the civil rights movement and the movement to be vocal and pop and active in their union was synonymous.
Yeah, synonymous. Yeah.
And they were, and for me, that was important for me because I saw my parents as workers in the change, the movement for change.
That's right.
That it was you hear. I remember in the 7th grade, I took typing class, so I could type. I would be the one who would type up the labels that went on the newsletters, and so I could be a part of the gossip.
You wanted to be involved.
I just felt that said. I remember in the 7th grade, so I took typing because of that, so I could do that every Saturday. Every Saturday is my responsibility to tape a newsletter. And invariably, what would happen is you get some sense of the discourse and also the gossip and everything.
Of course. Everything else, you were getting all the information.
Everything. And I remember that so well. And then I'm in San Francisco as well. And then I had a paper route from the time I was like 11 years old. I would get up like when I was 12 years old, I would get up in the morning at 4:30 in the morning, go deliver my 100 papers, and then come back and go to school.
I had a paper route when I was young too. Oh yeah. I understand.
My youngest brother, I'm saying, man, my youngest brother always said, man, you were the oldest paper boy in this country, man. You were the oldest.
But it seemed like that was the beginning of your activism.
Well, I think that's the part of reading, and at that moment when the part of reading, if I had to translate the way I read the newspaper and read everything else about the civil rights movement every time I got a chance to, I would have been an A student, you know. Mm-hmm. Consequently, right. I wasn't. But I also had a sense, I don't know what that sense is, that sense of knowing that something was changing and knowing that, and became engaged in my ways, because I wasn't that articulate. Mm-hmm. I wasn't that smart. I wasn't a great reader.
But you had a strong spirit.
I stressed that, but what I was great in mathematics. Mm-hmm. So the mathematics kept me grounded in some way, because there's a kind of another language for
That's right.
mathematics. Yeah. That other language to mathematics was something that I embraced in with my difficulty with wasn't called dyslexia then, but now we call it dyslexia. My difficulty with reading, and I wasn't very vocal. So every time I think about the times when my mother would come, we had something at the church, and well, how come you and my sister Connie and Reg, my brother Reg, how come you guys always just holding the palm like that? Because you know when you come to the black church,
that's right.
Oh man, you see my daughter sing that solo.
That's right.
Yeah.
They hit that deep bass solo. All of you know how that is.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
That's that before church and
after church.
How come you sitting and standing in the back like this? You know. Now my church claimed that I started there, but that's what I did when I started.
Of course, they're gonna make that claim. Of course, they're gonna make that claim.
But I just living in San Francisco and being there, being able to have a deep connection with my grandparents, my grandmother, my grandfather.
It's all from your roots.
Yeah, I can remember when my mother left me down with her mother, who was a midwife, great midwife. Wow. And when I was 6 months old, and I can remember during that time, not that time, but when I came back the next time, when I when I stayed with me and my sister was 1, and that means I was 2. And we're just walking in. My mother was about ready to have a 3rd child.
At home? Because women had babies at home then.
No, well, not my mother. If my mother would have had, my mother would have, if she was born, if she would gave birth to me in Georgia, rural Georgia, my grandmother would have delivered me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she wasn't just she was heroic.
Yeah. She
was one of those established ones. You know, I've run in New York City. I've run into Boston. I've run into people who said, I'm from Louisville, Georgia, and your grandmother
she birthed me.
Wow.
That's amazing.
You know, but you see her, man, she was amazingly
wow.
And she has a distant nephew, but she wouldn't know his music from The Man in the Moon.
Wow. Such
James
beautiful
Brown.
strength
James
and
Brown
history.
It's my distant cousin through my grandmother.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's some history right there. That's
it's
legacy.
Is that I think to talk about that, but my parents, when I saw them work in the post office in the union, they were proud black men and women who were embracing what was happening in the civil rights movement, and while at the same time they felt they gave value to that movement by their work. So I watched my young parents as they become politicized.
Yes.
You know, right after the war, the first during the civil rights movement, whether it's the Montgomery bus boycott or the subsequent actions taken by activists and citizens, and I think that's a really
There was a lot going on that time. I remember speaking to Jim Brown, and Jim Brown started the Black Economic Union.
Yeah.
And it was so amazing, talking to Jim about the work that was being done and still needs to be done today. So in the likes of Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, right, yourself, doing that work, that still, I think that speaks for the Black diaspora in this country. Do you feel like what's being done now? Is it a part of the dream, or does a new dream need to be had?
The systems of exploitation take on different aspects. When I'm using that word, not in terms
of course,
whenever you pay somebody a wage, whenever you extract labor from them, there's some level of exploitation. Yes. The person who produces from the labor is not the one really compensated for the labor. So at some point at time, the whole struggle, when we begin to talk about wage, labor, and the relationship to progress for workers particularly, it's always an ongoing struggle. The dynamics of how much do you deserve of the
pie, right?
Whatever the product produced, the value of the product produced, and that's always going to be an issue there, and we've seen it in terms of the way actors have been compensated different ways and
Absolutely.
different ways and when they reach a certain point in their
evolution of their career
or their ability to do that. So there's always going to be that dynamic in that. Of course, we deal with the other element as it becomes the formerly enslaved Africans.
Of course.
Is if they think of their value as labor. Because their value as labor is never accounted for.
Exactly.
In the same way that it should be accounted for. And historically it hasn't,
And historically, when you bring up these conversations, they don't want to talk about it. It's amazing when they say, oh, forget the past. But they don't forget their past. But they want us to forget our past.
Well, that's the case when we think of it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we look at the history and struggle of labor, and it's one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that on the lines, on the picket lines,
on the front lines, yes,
and apartheid itself. But so when you think about that, that's the case. But there's always going to be that friction, and unless they are directly tied to the outcome created.
That's right.
And that is not often placed into the context.
In the conversation, someone said a long time ago, don't expect someone who took something the way that they took it to be ready to just give it up. Never expect that. And I think we do ourselves a disservice and an injustice to think that our freedoms as well as our equality is going to come without a fight.
that's what the struggle is always.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's the human dynamic, the
Yes, sir.
capacity to say no.
Yes, sir. That's
the ability to say
to
no.
say no can just be as strong as your yes.
And they be strong. But you look at the early forms as the system evolves. The system evolves right after it was evolving during the American Revolution and into the works and into the 19th century, beginning of the 19th century. By within just less than 40 years of this country being a nation state.
That's right.
It was
A republic.
Within a republic, it was a state. It was an independent state. It was to become the richest country, the richest economy in the history of the way of the world. Why? And that was because of cotton. Because of cotton.
And we picked it.
Cotton was the first engine of the Industrial Revolution.
That allowed this country the wealth that they have.
The second instrument, fossil fuel.
Fossil fuel. You know what was interesting, Mr. Glover, is when I found out money wasn't printed on paper, it was printed on cotton. That was incredible. And I said, it all makes sense. It makes sense. Right? What we call a promissory note.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because it doesn't say money on the dollar. It says Federal Reserve Note.
Yeah.
We call it flat currency, right? Or colorable money that people call money, colorable money, flat currency, or promissory note. It doesn't say money on it, right? And we found that it was printed on cotton. And I said, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And that's something new.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was.
Oh, yes, sir.
I didn't know that.
Yes, sir.
But the idea of the relationship to gold would be in the
God's money.
the gold was
God's money.
But those are the kind of things that I think we have.
That's when we were on clearly in the 1940s, the gold standard we were on. And then Richard Nixon changed that in 1972, took us off the gold standard, right?
Yeah.
In 1972. And then all of a sudden it became about US dollars, but the country was always backed by gold.
Well, not necessarily. Right? I mean, and at some point it was the balance
of it.
Balance in some sense. Gold was the
true wealth, yes.
The tool to use that, But often, in order for an economy to grow, in order for changes to occur, gold itself is, in some sense, vacillates.
Yes.
How it is, how it's used within determining value in it.
Fungible, exactly.
Yeah.
It's fungibility. When we talk about this, it reminds me that, clearly the activist that you are, it reminds me of how you use your art to be a spokesperson for the people. So you could be one of those actors who goes, I played this role, I did that, I work with this person, I work with this director, but you actually use your voice for the people. And we believe that's so beautiful. We talked about that. You weren't doing it just to be an actor on screen. That's not where you come from. We had a conversation with Ernie Hudson earlier, and he has such an infinity for you, such a brotherhood for you, Ernie. And to watch you guys have a conversation about, the love of the industry because of what you do and how you grew in it, but what you actually use your voices for.
I use the term, I've grown and I've existed in this world through movements, and incredible movements over my lifetime. I was born in 1946, and certainly we were at the hest of dealing with a long standard of inequality rather, over a period of time at a period in history. Now, it's not the only battle that had been going on in the civil rights movement.
That's right.
As Reverend Barber calls the civil rights, the second, Reconstruction period.
Right. Yeah.
The first Reconstruction
right.
period, of course, after the Civil War, for the 7 years after the Civil War.
I mean, you had equal rights. You have women fighting for their rights at that time.
You have public education.
Public
and the formerly
education.
enslaved Africans who introduced public education, not only for African Americans, but poor whites as well.
That's right.
Who were excluded from this.
We did not exclude people. We were inclusive.
We're inclusive
of the rights that we were asking for.
So at the same time, there was this country has always been unequal, and the movements that began leading first of all to the emancipation of slaves, which had been going on from the beginning of this country's inception.
That's right.
Slavery has been on the block for it didn't make even sense to say all men was created equal.
Yeah.
That's
the
right.
only revolution made it all men was created equal was which, and women as well, or let's say men particularly. What revolution is? That's the Haitian Revolution.
That's the Haitian Revolution.
It's the
Toussaint Louverture.
Yeah, that's
Right?
the Haitian Revolution. So
Yep.
I think in a sense, the fact that people have found different creative ways in which they themselves can enhance their power collectively is, I think, one of the things that is not surprising, but is certainly one of the hallmarks of this country's development and growth.
That's right.
And the idea of citizens, it may. I think at the end, in the beginning of the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, and at that particular point, there was another kind of relationship because there was competing ideology.
Ideologies
People
that
were
were
talking about socialism
being introduced.
in that sense,
Yeah.
or communism and different other forms. Those ideas that Karl Marx and others,
Marxism, that's right,
came into existence through the avenue of labor itself.
That's right.
And so that has been an ongoing.
And that has been the corporate argument.
Yeah. So what I'm saying. So it's basically because it's attractive when people feel that collectively we can get together on the system that perhaps could change the dynamic.
A system of oppression.
Huh?
A system of oppression.
Who are fighting against that and fighting against that. And I think that has been the hallmark of certainly the last 200 years.
200 years in this country. Yeah.
This
Dr.
country.
Benjamin Chavis and I had that conversation recently. And we say that our history is not yet fully written. We still have work to do.
Oh, there's still work to do.
Yes, sir.
History's never.
Yes, sir.
History's never fully written. But
That's
history
right.
is. It's
That's right.
his. Usually, what did Malcolm say?
That's right. His story.
His
That's
story.
right. His
Malcolm
story.
said it was his story.
That's right.
But in a sense, how do we make our own history? How do working people make their own? How do we make the coalitions to eradicate poverty? And how do we lend our voice to the other voices around the world that are doing the same thing?
That's right.
You know,
collectively, again, it still becomes we're stronger together and collectively for one voice.
Yeah.
One voice.
Yes, exactly.
It's so beautiful to have you here in the studio.
Yes.
And I want to ask you a question. When I say Riggs and Murtaugh, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, the first thing it's a fine film.
Yeah.
It's a cultural.
Yes.
I would just say, I think when I think about and some of the stories around
In Lethal Weapon. Yeah.
The casting, Marion Doherty, who casted Lethal Weapon. Dick Donner, and he's written this in his book. Richard Donner, the director, written in his book, his autobiography. They were sitting down. Usually, what happens is you have the head of casting for Warner Brother and her assistant, the director and his assistant. In this case, they sit down. They say, "Well, who are you thinking about for Riggs, Martin Riggs.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is that Marion Doherty asked that question. I know he asked that question to Marion Doherty. She says, what about Mel Gibson? I like the idea. What about Martin Riggs? And she said, what about Danny Glover? I mean,
Murtaugh, yeah, Riggs and Murtaugh.
I hope we don't have any. I forgot who I was.
We got you.
Murtaugh,
Yeah.
Martin Riggs, and Roger Murtaugh.
That's right.
And she says, what about Danny Glover? And Richard Donner said, but he's black. And she said, yeah, he's black, so what? And she
That's
said,
beautiful.
And then she writes this in her own. He writes it in his biography.
Wow.
His
His autobiography, right?
Autobiography. Yeah. And And she said, so what? And he said, yeah, so what? Let's see what his schedule is. You know.
Wow, and
so
it's
things
beautiful.
like that. But Marion Doherty sent someone to see Carl Lumley and I in a play at the Matrix Theater, The Island, 2-character play, South African play.
South African play, I know
She
it.
sent someone down there
Sawubona.
to see us and brought us both to be part of ensemble cast for Escape from Alcatraz. Clint Eastwood, Escape from Alcatraz. And it didn't work that way. I just worked 2 days on it, but Carl worked, I think, part of the ensemble group, you know. And so casting people put you in the back of their mind. They see a moment, everything, when can I introduce them? And I would see it all the time. I just finished Color Purple. Color Purple was a Warner Brother project, and they had this idea of coming up with this buddy film. And a great thing.
Did you think that Mr. character was going to be as big as it was?
No, we don't. You know, I think there were a lot of. You had Bill Cosby show that was on there's this.
Of course.
This whole thing that black families are funny.
Yeah.
We
never know what something is going to do. We just go in and tell the truth about the characters. Well, we don't know. We're not in control of the advertising. We're not in control of anything.
But I think all those things are part of the whole mix of things. You know, of course, it became successful. We can say about it became successful.
Of course.
And to the point where the second one's more successful financially than the first.
That's
and
right.
And then it keeps on growing. So there's a whole group of kids
a whole new generation
alive.
That's right.
When
Who
I
see
made
it
the
now.
first one,
That's right.
Who know about Lethal Weapon by that and everything. But there's so many elements that go into that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is. It is one of those phenomena.
It's one amazing.
Work is a Warner Brother franchise.
Yeah. I got to tell you about a film that I love, that I think is so important, and it's called Beyond the Lights. Beyond the Lights, and my buddy Nate was in that film with you.
Beyond the Lights.
Yeah, Beyond the Lights, and it's so important because in this industry, people are dealing with so much depression, right? There's so much going on, and that film shed light on the need for connection and love. Simple. And protection. Protection, connectivity, and love. And of course, your role in it, again, lent itself to that. And once we are governed by what we consider to be the protection or love that we need, it changes everything.
Yes.
And so just another phenomenal role. And it just don't stop. And we're just so thankful that you have taken the position to not only come as you are, but change along the way. Activist, actor, producer, speaker, teacher, big brother.
That's a lot.
No, but those,
Descriptive ways to say it.
but those are the titles that you hold beautifully.
You know, I think that, as Paul said, each generation makes its own history. Robeson and
Paul Robeson.
yeah, and where is, I think you understand that. You know, if we come with that, that even cultural production is an important part of how we see ourselves and we see the community we want to build around us. You know, what is the community we want to create around us? How do we want to use the word community within a broad framework and really talk about that? And it comes ultimately through love, respect.
That's right.
And those are two important things as well. So I would like to, when I go to places, sometimes people may have taken a position, may have disagreed with a position I've taken on something, and of course I'm not going to be. I took the position because
right.
I think it was the right position
That's right.
to take. But if you don't take a position, that means that you don't have a voice.
That's right.
You can't be a part of the discourse.
That's right.
And so the idea that yes, I want to be a part of the discourse, not simply for my own community,
That's right.
but my relationship, with my community
That's right.
and the other communities that exist as well.
That's right. Dr. Miles Monroe says you can only see so far, but a vision will pull you through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to just wrap it up from there because I think you said it and you broke it down so it can forever be broken. You have to see the vision for yourself and your community. Yeah. And that's so beautiful. Would you like to close us out?
I'm just so inspired by you, and I'm just so grateful to have been able to been a part of this podcast with you. I am just so thankful for the work that you've done and that you continue to do in our communities. I'm Tari Henson.
And I'm Darren DeWitt Henson.
And you've been grooved.